Loki smirked, leaning forward to have the best view. He was sitting upon a rock, above the path he was following, and put his cheek on the palm of his hand, the elbow resting on his left lifted knee. He didn't have to wait that long before seeing the girl, Isa, walking in front of him. Without noticing him, he would let her follow him along enough so he could set up a trap for her, and now he was getting impatient. The girl kept walking forward, continuing on the path, or so she thought. She suddenly gasped, sensing the ground disappear from under her feet and falling. She thought she would fall, but instead, she just stopped to the bottom of the pit, blinking in disbelief before hearing a loud, satisfied laugh of Loki as he slid down his rock and walked towards the pit where she was sitting, mouth hanging open from shock. "Look what the cat just caught," he purred with satisfaction, his green eyes gleaming happily at the vision he had before him. Isa scowled and glared at him, despite being in a vulnerable position. "I have to admit, I'm almost impressed you kept up with me for so long," he said, cocking his head to the side playfully. "I don't think I'm defeated so easily," she replied. "I don't remember you being so fierce when I shooed you away yesterday," he remarked. "I dropped the game when you got me angry. Never anger a woman, that's the first rule. Did your mother teach you nothing?" He mocked, her eyes taking the full playful glint in his hand in his own. "You'd think someone like you could scare me?" he asked, chuckling in amusement. She got up so quickly and kicked off the ground so fast, and she didn't have time to react before she landed against the wall of the deep pit and used it for momentum. She grabbed a root and used it to balance herself out of the hole, surging towards Loki. So quickly he only had time to let out a shocked gasp before she had grabbed by his collar. She turned to him around and pushed him backwards, dagger of her own at his throat. His feet were on the edge of the pit, and her hand was around his collar, the only thing keeping him from falling in. He glanced down at the fall, waiting for him, and swallowed. He had had much worse falls, but he would have never expected the crying, pleading girl to be so fast and strong. His pride was wounded deeply. He looked back at her and saw a cold gleam he didn't see before. He couldn't help himself but feel intrigued at all the faces she had shown him already. "You tricked me. Shame on you. I should have thought you'd lead me to some sort of trap," she said with a hard voice. "Now surely we can discuss this," he said, raising his palms to show how unharmed and beaten, even if it was hard for him to admit it. She stared at him, then frowned before giving a wicked smile. "Give me one reason to do so," she mocked, using the same sentence he had the day before. He clenched his teeth before smiling, trying to look as charming as he could. "Because I'm a prince of Asgard, and hurting me would only mean having you in prison for the rest of your life, if not longer," he argued thoughtfully. "Or perhaps the sentence is death? I don't remember. Such a pity, if you were to lose such pretty head." She stared at him, eyes narrowing before pulling him back to the proper ground. She wanted him to fall to the dust, but he was too quick and nimble. He turned to face her with all his height. "Why are you following me?" She sighed deeply, putting her dagger back in the sheath, and she had kept it hidden the day before. "I told you why. I want to find out the truth about my mother," she simply said. "Believe me or not, I do not care about your mission, and with or without you, I'll reach the mountain giants." She leaned forward, smiling just enough to make Loki's heart miss a tiny beat. He frowned at the feeling, trying to ignore it while his grayish-green eyes met with the bright emerald ones. "Now, I'm sure a prince like you would want to sleep peacefully without having to worrying about someone attacking him in the night, right? Keep me with you, and you won't have to worry about that, at least." He snorted, smirking, and crossed his arms over his chest. "Tempting, really, but I won't fall for your charms, Lady Isa." "You are a hard man to read, I'll give you that," she said, tilting her head, looking impressed. He smirked, and they had stared at each other for a long moment, none of them willing to give up the staring challenge. Loki took this time to observe her from head to toe. She was pretty, but not the most astonishing woman he'd ever saw. She had long auburn hair, tied in a messy braid, fair skin and clothes that were comfortable and easy to move in. But her eyes were the most mesmerizing. A deep green that kept changing colors, lime shade to emerald green, then taking turquoise and seafoam shades. He couldn't look away, and definitely didn't want to. "You're interesting, I'll give you that," he finally said, his voice low and huskier than he thought it would be. She smirked, her lips pink and inviting, but she straightened up. "Does this mean I can join in your quest?" she asked. "I'm not teaming up with a lost little mouse," he answered firmly. She laughed, jerking his head backwards before taking a step forward, her long red nails scratching his jaw just enough to send shivers, and she smirked. "You think me as a mouse? I'm more of a wolf, really." She leaned even more forward, her lips near inches from his ear. "And I eat kitties like you for breakfast," she whispered. He grabbed her hand and pushed her away so they could face each other once again. She seemed surprised by his reaction and smirked. "Do you really think you could charm me so easily?" She didn't answer, glaring at him before he released her hand, taking a step away and waving his hand ever so slightly to take away all illusions. The path appeared once again. "I won't force you to go back to Brisfrost, but I have more important tasks to execute. But if you wish to disobey your prince's orders and go straight to your death, then be sure I'll take the first chance to watch you, writhing in pain. Die and it will be on you. Survive and it'll be on you as well. I won't let someone like you insult me," he said with his royal voice, before smirking at her darkly. "But I can't wait to see the wolf scared as a puppy and calling for me for help. Not that I will give you in any cases," he added with a shrug. He left her completely astonished and started to walk back on his path. After a few minutes, he realized that she hadn't followed him, and he smirked to himself. He probably scared her off enough this time, and she won't cling on to him like a leech any longer. A few hours later, after checking several times he wasn't followed, Loki stopped at the rock to take a break. Night would fall soon, and he didn't want her to sleep without a cover. But if he had kept going on, he would reach a valley between two mountains where it would be hours of a walk before being able to find a cave or anything he could to rest. He sighed before glancing around him, scanning the area for a good place to stay without worrying too much. After another hour of walking, he finally found a cave that wasn't too deep and settled there, making a fire with his magic and sitting by it, watching carefully outside as the night took place. He ate a little and finally lay on the hard ground, his body aching from the walking. But even if he tried to fall asleep, he couldn't do anything else but stare with wide open eyes at the burning, crackling fire. He wondered how Ford was doing. If anything else happened to his family while he was away. He was 2 days from his fortress of the mountain giants. He was just a few days away from making his father proud, at last. His heart beat in excitement at the glory he would bring him when he'll be back in Asgard. He looked up at the stars of Jotunheim, and it with a smile that the prince fell asleep, dreaming of his hopes of becoming true. Loki woke up, startled, sat upright. Glancing around, he blinked away the sleepiness, his heart hammering in his chest while accustomed to the darkness. The only thing he could have seen was the embers of the fire. He's pretty sure he slept a few hours and a natural fire would have turned off by then, but his fire was magical. There was no way it could have abandoned him like that. He frowned before he could do anything. He then heard a loud noise, sounding like a grunting huff made from a very, very large creature, the sound resonating from the entire cave and all of Loki's being. It was the same sound that had woken him up. He glanced outside and finally realized that he couldn't see the stars. His eyes widened and he got up suddenly, getting his dagger out and watching the wall that had appeared at the entrance of the cave. He gritted his teeth, cursing the mountain giants that must have noticed him and put a giant rock in front of the entrance to lock him up. He heard an irritating screeching sound and looked around, trying to determine where it had came from. But all sound resonated and echoed in the cave. He focused, then turned, astonished eyes towards the rock, when he had noticed the sound came from it. Frowning in intrigue, He stepped forward slowly, and his green eyes only grew wider as he noticed that the rock was moving. The wall covered in plates as big as the breastplate of a red, so dark it looked black. The breastplates were sliding upon each other and against the rock of the walls, creating this friction irritating sound. Therewith, he realized that the breastplates were scales. Loki frowned even more, leaning forward, hesitating fingers approaching the hot giant scales, but suddenly it was gone. He jumped away, raising his dagger and blinking, almost blinded by the moon and the stars shining in the sky. He swallowed before approaching slowly, watching the area. Did he just dream? Maybe the Jonam air wasn't good for his sanity. He stepped outside the cave, eyeing his surroundings, but there was nothing in view. Nothing but mountains and the infinite sky above his head. Loki blinked, trying not to find a good reason to have such hallucinations, and slowly let his dagger down, keeping it in his hand but looking around in disbelief. The heavy huffing sound broke the silence as he turned around sharply, dagger raised and ready to strike. The prince's lips opened in shock as he looked up and up before his eyes finally settled on the head of the beast. A gigantic, rangy creature covered in scales, thicker than a giant's skull. The body was so long, so huge, it was impossible for him to see it all. It almost looked like a giant snake, if it wasn't for the wings on its back, reaching as high as the fortress ceiling back in Asgard. Its legs and paws were massive and muscular, with talons sharper and longer than swords, and at the head was a triangular with vicious golden eyes, shining dangerously in the night, with jaws and teeth so impressive it would have made the bravest Valkyries shiver in fear. A dragon, Loki thought to himself, his eyes wide open in shock and fear as he recognized a creature he only heard tales of. He shivered in fear, his heart beating hard in his chest. His little useless dagger of no use when, himself, he just took a toothpick to the creature that was watching him with a cold, predatory gaze. His hand trembling around his weapon, and he thought about diving back to the cave. But then the dragon moved ever so slightly, and the paw resting on the roof of the cave. It was only minutes ago he suddenly crashed. Rocks flew, dust raised, and the dragon shrieked. The sound so frightening it sent cold shivers down the god's spine as it resonated in the mountains. Loki covered his head with his arms, miraculously avoid the rocks falling around him. But when his eyes glanced up, he suddenly saw the beast that obviously wanted to swallow him all. The dragon opened his gigantic jaws, offering a beautiful view of his sharp teeth. The trembling god saw the flickers of a golden fire in the back of its throat. Without thinking, Loki turned around and ran straight towards the precipice. He jumped off, and when the violent fire hit the rock he was standing on moments ago, he felt the flames scorching his hair and clothes, and for a moment he felt like the floating in the air before gravity took over and his body dropped. He probably yelled, but his voice was covered by the angry shriek of the dragon and its moves. Loki eyed the platform of rocks where he would most probably land and die, cursing his inability of flying unlike Thor. Thinking fast, he used his magic and made solid roots appear. Attached to the rock itself, he managed to grab one, stopping in the drop sudden move that made his teeth clack against each other before the momentum he had, while falling, overtook him once again. His hands tight around the Alana. He started to slide down, his hand burning so violently he screamed through the clenched teeth, but refused to let go. He thought he would just fall on the rock platform anyway, going down too fast to get out of the unscathed, but his descent finally showed up to stop. He didn't even have time to breathe that his burning hands gave up and he fell, yelping and hitting the platform violently enough to have the air of his lungs ejected. He coughed and took a deep breath. His whole body was shaking in fear, and adrenaline from his heart stopping he had. He lifted up his hands, trembling like a leaf from the pain and panic, observing his fingers and palms cut, bloodied and still stinging in a burning pain from the friction against the roots. But he didn't have time to think that, as he was safe before he heard rocks falling. He just had enough time to avoid one hitting his face before he jumped to his feet. kneeling on the ground as hear another terrifying shriek roar that shook the mountains. He glanced up and saw the gigantic red-scaled dragon out in front of him. The creature had jumped from one mountain to another in order to keep eye contact on its prey. It was so big he just extended his paw to reach the other side of the mountain facing Loki. The god shivered when he saw the golden eyes lowering towards him. With a speed of clarity of mind he didn't expect it, God had stopped shaking and frowned, focusing as he moved his hands with sharp, determined actions. He threw his spells, illusions, and magic all around him, hiding him in the view of the dragon and making several of his own silhouettes at different places on the mountain's side. For a moment he was scared that the magical creature could see through his tricks, but the golden vicious gaze looked at each and every Loki sitting on the mountain and shrieked in rage and furious. The dragon opened his jaws and threw a fire so hot, even if it was far away from the actual Loki. He felt his body heating up so violently that drops of sweat rolled down his face. He gritted his teeth, focusing on the spells he had to perform. Magic was all about to whisper, something tempting but never impelling. He closed his eyes for more focus, shutting out the angry shrieks of a dragon as it maneuvers and leaps from mountain to mountain, attacking each and every illusion of himself in a desperate attempt to get to him. Suddenly the dragon jumped in the side of the mountain where Loki was, and it shook violently, breaking the god's concentration. Rocks flew and fell all around him, so he jumped backwards, right when the ground under his feet cracked and fell. His back was against the wall, and his feet were barely resting on the very small edge of the left of the platform where he had landed. He swallowed, trying to focus again, but the mountain shook another time from the shriek of the dragon, and he almost fell into the emptiness. His bloody, trembling fingers and nails grasped the stone desperately in his chest and went up and down with heavy breaths. He saw pure blackness where he would fall, knowing that such a fall would last for a long time, and there was no way he could pull a trick to save himself this time. Loki! He almost jumped in shock to hear his name, but glanced down, seeing Isa on another path several meters down from his position. He was almost glad to see her. Almost. The mountain shook again when the young woman clenched the mountainside tightly, her lips thinned in concentration as she looked around. But if Loki heard her, the dragon has too, and he turned his head down to her, shrieking before diving. Loki's heart stopped when he saw the creature's red jaws closing on the young woman before flying off in the mountains, its gigantic figure looking endless. But then the furious shriek proved to the god that it had been an illusion. He would have laughed, but the woman's voice reached his ears another time. Jump! He wanted to glance down before doing so, but the edge he was standing on shook and his feet slid off. He fell forward towards the emptiness, but only after a few meters down, his fall was stopped. At first he didn't understand what it was until he realized it was wind slowing down his fall. Elemental magic? He wondered in disbelief. It was the hardest magic of all. When his mother and himself were avoiding this kind of magic, it was taking too much of a toll on the user, and it was too predictable. He glanced down and saw Isa, the real one, hiding under a cave, out of view of the dragon, moving her hands and biting her lips in focus. Then her magic failed, as you would expect from an elemental spell, and he fell. His hands just had the time to grab onto the edge of the platform where Isa was, but one of his hands let go. He yelped, knowing his other hand, after the Lana, wasn't able to hold on much longer. Isa ran to him and fell to the ground, catching his arm and tried to lift him up. Loki glanced up, astonished at seeing the girl holding in his one hand, her brilliant gaze looking straight into his soul. He pierced his lips, then swung his body to grab the edge of the platform with his other hand. With his strength and the Volva's help, he managed to climb onto the platform and run for cover, just as the dragon glanced in their direction, but saw nothing. The two magicians' chests were lifted up and down with heavy, short breaths, hiding behind the rocks, praying it wouldn't fall into their heads. Both of them were shaking, and Loki glanced down at his open, bloody palms, wincing from the stinging pain. "You're welcome," Isa said between two puffs of breath. He glanced at her, not understanding what she meant. "What?" he asked, frowning lightly. "I saved you. You're welcome," she said, throwing him a hard look. He blinked in disbelief at the impudence she dared to use with him. "Are you deaf?" she asked, frowning at him. He snorted, then glared back. "How dare you use such—" "Later, drama queen. There's a dragon on our tails, if you haven't noticed," she exclaimed as to prove her words. The dragon shrieked viciously. Loki swallowed back his pride and glanced outside. He couldn't see much from there, but he had moved his hands, making more illusions of Isa and him appearing on the mountains, running, standing, jumping to attract the dragon's attention. "You used elemental magic," was all he could say, more impressed than he had cared to admit. She gave a frustrated sigh before turning towards him, hands on her hips and looking highly annoyed, which annoyed him. "Do you want to die, burnt and eaten by the dragon, or buried alive in the mountains? Because royal ass or not, you're not going to last the night if you keep bothering yourself on the meaningless details," she hissed. He stared at her, was a part of him trying to slap her words and her behavior, and another forced to admit she was right. "We need to get rid of it," she said, frowning. "Finally, some sense," she mocked. "But how? You're Loki, the god of mischief. Don't you have some ideas?" she asked. "Why would I trust you?" he replied, looking down at her fragile-looking frame. "Because I have no other choice but to trust you to save both of us," she answered, sounding as if the words were ripping off her throat. He observed her for a long moment, wondering if he could really believe her words, or if she was actually trying to get something at the end. But the shriek of the dragon reminded him that it was the main true threat for the moment, and he mentally shook himself, forcing his thoughts to remain as clear as he calculated as ever. "You and I can't possibly kill that dragon. Our only hope is to lure him and slow him down long enough to escape the mountain," he said. She watched him intensely, drinking his words, and he started to explain his plan. At the end, her eyes lit up, an amazingly tempting fire in the mid-darkness before she grinned. Her smile was as mischievous as his. "Do you think you can do it?" he asked, finally, staring at her. "Let's go slay a dragon, your highness," she answered.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, stay pretty.